Now, I move to the timeline. This is important, actually. I want you to look at this. I put it a number by itself. The desert timeline wandering in the plains from Exodus to the plains of Moab. How we move this from here? Here we go. Okay. So day one we will count from Exodus. Remember how I said the beginning of their history started at Passover, right? Passover is day one. Few days, we don't know how long, it might be 2 days, 3 days, they crossed the Red Sea. That's the second station. In bold, these are big stations in their travel. In the third month of their departure, a third month means between day 60 and day 90, they encampment at Mount Sinai. They reached Mount Sinai in those 2 to 3 month period. What happened there? They had the covenant. They were given instruction about the tabernacle, and they built the tabernacle. They had the golden calf as the instructions were given, and the beginning of the first census. And Moses actually said exactly when he did the first census. It is the first day of the second month of the second year. So how long did they stay there? How did they stay there? They left Mount Sinai at the 20th day of the second month of the second year. So how long did they stay at Mount Sinai? Let's say that they reached there at 2 months. And in the second month, on the 20th day, they left. How long did they stay? Round figure, don't have to be very exact. So they reached there in the second month or the third month, or at least at the end of the second month, let's say 60 days, and they left in the second month, the 20th day of that month, the second year. They stayed there a year, give or take. So they stayed encamping by the mountain for a whole year. And that's why I should expect some remains. You have this huge population staying in one place in the desert. There is nothing. That makes no sense. Not even a child scrapping on a piece of stone. So when you go to Saudi Arabia, you would see that. You would see there is a place the Bedouins know. This is actually where Moses stayed and his people. There is actually tombs for them. There is over the face of the earth a lot of encampment places, rounded stones, fireplaces, altars, grinding stones, spearheads. Everything is made in the style of the Egyptians in Saudi Arabia. Why would you have Egyptian stuff in Saudi Arabia? It makes no sense. So, so that 20th day they leave. By the end of that month, it took them 11 days to reach, 11 days from Mount Sinai to Kadesh Barnea, which is the plains of Moab. Took them 11 days. That's not far. It's not far at all. 11 days to reach there as a huge group of people. And there they stayed first for 40 days because God told them. Moses told the people, and people said, let's spy the land. And God said, sure, go spy it. Pick one from your tribe, 12 tribes, 12 of them, go spy the land. They went to spy the land, spent 40 days. And here's something for me, I always think about it. Why did Jesus have to stay with his apostles for 40 days after his resurrection? What is the point? Yes. They were our 12 spies that they would actually witness and handle the resurrected body of Christ. That's what you will be. This is what we are called to be, like him. So they had to spend 40 days with the Lord. So 40 days the spies spent in the promised land, then what? Came back. Here is democracy, the beauty of democracy when it's perfect, right? 12 spies, 10 of them come back and say, beautiful land, as God said exactly, but no, we cannot go because the people are giants, big, huge people. Most probably they're like maybe 6 foot and above. They're 6 feet and above, each one of them. The shortest of them is 6'5" maybe. So you go and try to challenge, those big giant basketball players. and you go walk next to one of them, and you're 5 or 5'2" maybe, and you look to them like this, and there's a verse they say in counseling that's beautiful. He says, don't make comparisons. It's really bad. He said, we were in their eyes, in the numbers, and in our eyes like grasshoppers. Like when you take the stand, the point of view of a grasshopper. You're walking in the grass, and somebody's a grasshopper next to you. What would you do as a grasshopper? Stay away of their way, because they can actually smush you. They will not see you. So they didn't care they were spies. They really looked at them and said, oh, little people, it's okay. So they went back and told the Israelites, we can't take it. We can't take it. 2 of them said, doesn't matter. The taller they are, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Doesn't matter. But 2, what would they do against 10? What would 2 do against 10? They said, don't do that. Don't mistrust God. Don't distrust God, because we have been with the Egyptians. We had seen what happened with the Egyptians. It has only been a year, people. A year. We saw what happened to them. Have you forgotten? Nobody listened to them. They wanted to stone Moses and Aaron, go back to Egypt. And it was bad. And I call this democracy at its best. 10 against 2. Who wins in democracy? 10. What happened? They refused to go. And God said to Moses, you know what? They're right. They shouldn't be entering the promised land. This generation is not ready. Turn around, and here is something that's very sad. And Moses cried big time and begged God to forgive him. He said, you turn around and go by the way of the Red Sea. 40 years is written on you. For each day they spent in the promised land, they will have to spend 1 year in the wilderness until this generation completely goes away. I'm going to take their kids, who they said, those people said, they will take our kids and make them slaves. Said, no, I'm taking your kids and make them the landowners. Forget about you. So this happened. You want to hurt God, really to hurt him is distrust him. Sin, God can take. But to distrust God, no, it's not going to be okay. So at Kadesh Barnea, the end of the 2nd month of the 2nd year, they spent 40 days spying the promised land. Then the beginning of 40-year generation-long march, wandering for 40 years. You cross the 40 years, the second time they come back to the same place, but this time it's called Acacia Grove. The king of Edom, or Moab and Edom are close to each other, brings a soothsayer. The Bible calls him prophet, but he's a soothsayer, fortune teller. A person who, because you might say, a prophet, why would a prophet curse Israel? That doesn't make sense. He's not a prophet for God. He's a soothsayer. He's a, what does it call it? A spiritist, psychic reading. Somebody who is really, by the way, those people are correct. They have powers. This is not a joke. But God intervened. So he told him, I'm going to give you big money. Come and curse these people. You know the story with the donkey, when the donkey talked? That's Balaam. So he comes on his way. He is so much interested in the money, he will do anything. He asks Balak to make sacrifices for him 7 times. And each time he starts to speak, instead of saying curses, what happens? He blesses 7 times. And he, at the end, Balak said, go back to your home before I kill you, because you're not good. So what happened? Balak said, just wait a second. Let me say my blessing, and then I will deal with you. So he let God speak through him. And when God spoke through Balaam, God blessed Israel. That's how he is. God does not let go. They are not good. They are bad. They are whatever. But God is still interested in blessing them. And Balaam said, okay, down with the blessing. Let me tell you something. You're not going to read this in the book of Numbers. It's going to be in Revelation. Balak, king, come, I'll tell you what we should do. I cannot curse them. It's not, I cannot curse them. God will not let me curse them. But I can tell you how they can curse themselves. So he said what? If, now, Balak, the king, is the king of Moab. The king of Moab. Moab was one of the strongest worshippers of Baal. How do you worship Baal? Excuse me in what I'm going to say. It is by erecting big temples. It's almost like Venus temple in Corinth, fill it with girls who dedicated themselves to be prostitutes for Baal. So it is double whammy. You go into the temple and those girls will have sexual relationship with the men that comes to the temple and offer that as an offering too. So what is there? Idol worship and also sexual immorality. So he said, you don't have to curse them. Don't. Just send those girls to the people, the Israelites, and they will curse themselves. The second time they come to the promised land, at the border, Balak listened to Balaam, and he gives them money for that, and send out the girls of Moab, and they started to do this. Started to worship Baal by sexual immorality. And there's a scene described in the book of Numbers about one of the great princes in Israel taking one of those girls and offering it to the other men in the tribes. And one of the priests came out with a spear, and he speared both of them when they were lying together. And this ended up with a plague, except when that priest did this, the plague stopped. The plague stopped. And we tell you that Moses and the elders of Israel were crying at the door of the tabernacle like women, just sitting there and just weeping. But Eleazar, that priest, went, and God said he stopped the plague because he did what God felt. It's not about the sexual immorality, more than about what? The worship of Satan. His people are leaving him to worship Satan. This is the biggest problem. And the act was very wicked and corrupt. So after that plague is finished, they go and do the second census that I told you about. Okay, so this is the summary. This is the summary of all the events that happened in the 40 years.